Just when it seemed the United States and the European Union were poised to plunge headlong into a trade war, Trump has at the 11th hour pushed the pause button. What was due to be a blunt force economic blow on June the 1st in the form of 50% tariffs on EU imports has now been postponed until July the 9th. The catalyst, a phone call with the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, which Trump, in typical flourish, called a privilege. Well, what lies behind this last-minute retreat, this privilege, and what does it tell us about Trump's character, the EU's leverage, and the perilous dance of international trade diplomacy? To be perfectly frank, I don't think it tells us very much at all. It tells us that we're in this sort of knife-edge world where everything depends on a whim. I don't know where the expression, to be perfectly frank, comes from. When I was a baby, I was adopted. My original name was Francis, and I've always found the expression, to be frank, rather odd. And then I eventually found out my birth name, and I realised it's quite pertinent. So, to be perfectly frank, Trump's Truth Social post was characteristically self-congratulatory and diplomatically unfiltered. I agreed to the extension July the 9th, 2025. It was my privilege to do so, as if posturing and postponing a political guillotine were a magnanimous act, a guillotine that Trump had himself imposed. Ursula von der Leyen framed the call as a good exchange, and markets responded accordingly. The German DAX surged 1.6%, and shares in major European car makers clawed back losses. A sigh of relief, generally, echoed through Stuttgart and the trading centres around Europe. But make no mistake, this was a stay of execution, not a pardon, and the European Commission has described this as a new impetus for talks. But given that Trump had declared the EU was formed to screw the United States, and given the fact that he's also said that there won't be any talks, one must ask how much good faith remains in the negotiation room. And why the delay, therefore? Three reasons come to mind. First, that Trump loves brinkmanship. He dangles chaos, then stages a rescue. This is the art of the deal. Provoke, retreat, appear reasonable. Second, markets matter, and European stocks were rattled by Friday's threat, and while US markets were closed for Memorial Day, Trump's advisors knew the economic fallout would ripple across the Atlantic and come home to roost. Third, von der Leyen's played it cleverly by asking for a delay in public and stating the EU was ready to act swiftly and decisively. She gave Trump the opportunity to look generous without caving. It's classic transactional Trump. He backs down when it benefits his image, not because of any ideological softening. The EU exported £443 billion in goods to the US last year, compared to $273 billion in imports. That trade surplus has long irked Trump, who sees the EU as a bloated bureaucracy exploiting American industry. But tariffs on that scale would be mutually destructive. Germany's car sector, Ireland's pharmaceutical exports, France's luxury houses, all exposed. But so too is the US, whose agricultural producers and tech firms rely on European markets and standards. Should Trump proceed on July the 9th, it could trigger EU retaliation, WTO litigation, and a dramatic recalibration of transatlantic ties. In the shadow of a renewed Russian threat and Chinese assertiveness, a trade war among allies is not just foolish, it's globally negligent. I should point out, while I'm talking about the EU, I've been chatting to some people wiser than I am about farming and about fertilizers, and last night there were noises about fertilize frustrations, but it seems that those British farmers who've leapt on the opportunity to avoid the careful scrutiny of of fertilizer options recommended by Europe and have gone a bit sort of freelance, are perhaps not fully thinking of the consequences of their action. Yes, the new arrangement, the new EU-UK reset is going to cost money because they're going to have to go back to the old agreements. Is this a bad thing? Perhaps on reflection, no, it's not. But I'll do a piece about that tomorrow. Trump's timing here is not accidental. He's in campaign mood and casting around once more as America's economic avenger. He has a great deal to prove because in the first 100 days of his office, he achieved nothing. Tariffs allow him to sound patriotic without passing legislation. They're the cudgel of populist economics. But this comes with risk. Domestic inflation, retaliatory tariffs, investor skittishness undercut the message. Moreover, if Europe calls his bluff, the delay exposes Trump's weakness, not his strength. And von der Leyen has the difficult task of wrangling 27 member states into a coherent position while negotiating with a president who sees consistency as weakness. She must preserve unity, avoid capitulation, and keep the dialogue open. So where does this leave us? We're not at peace in trade terms. We're at some sort of pause, an armistice, to continue the war metaphor. Trump's postponement is not a change of heart; it's a change of timing. It buys Brussels a few precious weeks, but it also locks both sides into a high-stakes poker game of negotiation. The clock is ticking towards July the 9th, and between now and then, expert rhetoric, brinkmanship, market tremors, and perhaps if cooler heads prevail, a fragile and imperfect deal might emerge. I hope that Trump's privilege to delay becomes the EU's opportunity to de-escalate. Because there's too much worry in the world without imposing it, simply to be difficult.